In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Heavens, plural, right? Because the word in Hebrew there is shemayim, a plural word. And the earth was a formless and desolate emptiness, and darkness was over the surface of the deep. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the surface of the waters. Then God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. God saw that the light was good, and God separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening, and there was morning, one day. Then God said, "Let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it separate the waters from the waters." God made the firmament and separated the waters that were below from the waters that were above the firmament, and it was so. God called the firmament heaven, and there was evening, and there was morning, a second day.
He did what? He called the firmament what? So wait, he's describing this thing called the firmament that separates
How do we define that? What's that? We don't use that word in everyday language, you know?
And in the Hebrew, it literally means something that's as if it's beaten out metal plate or a vault of heaven.
Rakia is the Hebrew word. Right?
That's the Hebrew word. It was understood as a solid dome.
That's what it says in the definitions and the lexicons and concordances, doesn't it?
Interesting.
It is.
Solid dome. It's the same word if with the firmamenta for Latin, or also the stereoma in the Greek, which would be a flat expanse or a solid expanse. That's where you see some translations, or actually in modern translations, they use the word expanse instead of firmament, but they're just pulling that from the Greek, which means the same thing. It's a solid structure.
Yeah, it's pretty consistent description both in scripture and in the definitions, because I suppose if it separates two bodies of water, if it divides a body of water above it and below it, it would have to be solid. It would have to be firm, like firmament entails.
Right, which is why the literal definition does mean that it's an actual firm. They called it the vault of heaven. They called it, we're going to see that in other scriptures as well, but sometimes you run into folks that say, well, oh, it's just the sky. And you're like, well, that seems to be an opposite definition of something that's firm, and that's a solid structure that's supporting waters above it, right? Because they'll say, well, maybe it was just the clouds, so therefore it's just the sky because there's water in the clouds above it. But it doesn't support those waters, does it? That water from the clouds falls down at some point.
Correct. Right. and if the firmament, as we see later on in the first chapter there, if the firmament was just the sky, then they would be saying, the people that support that, understanding would be saying that the sun, the moon, and the stars are in, because they would mean our atmosphere usually when they say firmament is the sky or the atmosphere. So we know that they don't believe that the sun, moon, stars are in our atmosphere.
That's right.
But if you would, is there any chance you could go back to Genesis 1:8 real quick? There was one quick point that I think could be driven home a little bit further, because God called this structure that we just looked at the definition of, we just looked at some scripture, and God called it heaven. So every time we see this concept heaven mentioned in the scriptures, is it true, Sean, that it's referring back to this structure, this dome vault?
It's crazy, right? Because what it is, he's speaking about a substance called the rakia. It's the firmament. It's the English word we use, and then he gave it a name. He gave a substance a name. I in the past I've used the analogy that if you made a house of wood, and then you've completed all the levels of the house and the doors and the windows and everything, when you step back and you're done with that house that you made out of wood and stone and metal nails and screws, you don't step back and you say, oh, look at my beautiful wood, stone, metal, nails, and screws.
Nope.
Right? You step back and you say, look at my home.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And that's what he did. He got done making this multiple levels, as you can see in the picture on screen. He got done making multiple levels in days 1 and days 2. And after all these levels were completed, he stood back and he said, look, this is heaven. This overall house with multiple layers is called heaven, which is very interesting.
Yeah, because he made heavens the first day in the beginning, and then the one directly over our head on the second day, and he called that heaven.
Right.
That was I can't drive it home enough. That really blew my mind when I realized that heaven is not some ethereal, wispy ghost land of an extra dimensional other galaxy, anything. It's a physical structure above our heads, and that was hard to grasp at first.